Well, hello, that's me again. Today is November 21, it is Monday, and we have some business to discuss. And let's start with things which are not directly related to what I want to tell you, but let's take a look at New York Times. If you go to the front page of the New York Times, yesterday or Saturday, they suddenly recognized that some of the video of execution of the 10 Russian POWs by the Nazis of the armed forces of Ukraine seems to be genuine, and then suddenly some expert, whatever the experts work for the New York Times, I don't think so, there are many experts there, they actually admitted that, yeah, this is the war crime, a crime against humanity, violation of any norms, of, especially for the non-combatants, because POWs, people who do not fight, they don't have weapons anymore, they are not considered the combatants really anymore. They're prisoners of war. As you already know, and you can look up my previous videos, one of them recently, like 5 days ago or 7 days ago, I don't remember, you can look it up. It's about Western media. Most of the people who work in the established media in the United States, and particularly in general in the West, very many, I mean majority, by default, they are war criminals and criminals against humanity, because these people are constantly on the record for many decades now pushing for wars. And while in terms of Vietnam War, you can say that there are some liberal or Democratic Party related media have been anti-war, so to speak. Starting from after Vietnam, everything was basically pushing the war against everybody around the world, and it was normal for them to condone and just look at those war crimes as absolutely normal thing. A maximum they could have expressed was the some kind of very timid reaction. If you think so that this is the first time they suddenly wake up, no, this is not the first time. If you want to look up the tragedy of Beslan 2004 and the position, disgusting and basically giddy and schadenfreude position of the Western media, it's all out there. But this is just the kind of one of the things I think you need to know. But now let's get to our goats, so to speak, and let's talk about the larger picture of what is happening, and we can call it the economic sit rep. And as you know, I'm always on record. I'm always pushing this idea. Look at the larger picture. Look at what is going on. And here we will start with this, just to demonstrate to you. Seemingly we have this guy, obviously Mr. Lord Austin, who is of course Lloyd Austin, the former member of the board of Raytheon, and he is now the defense secretary of the United States, and he is the guy, well, don't quote me, quote Colonel Douglas McGregor. He said that Mr. Austin was a beneficiary of the affirmative action, but you know what, I'm not going to judge here his military, so to speak, merits. I don't think so they're very high, to put it mildly, but look what he comes up yesterday with, so to speak. So he says on one of the conferences, I believe somewhere, I believe it was in Canada, maybe, doesn't really matter. It was about Ukraine as always, because we know that Ukrainians are more important than Americans for Biden administration. And he says this: the Russians have a massive military and impressive weapons, but this hasn't helped them prevail in campaign of the conquest and cruelty. I don't know. The only cruelty I see, and as even New York Times cannot deny this anymore, maybe they should not, because who knows, the tables can turn, and some people who supported this slaughter of innocents, especially civilians, by VSU in New York Times, they may face their, however delayed justice. But The point, of course, I don't know what the cruelty he is talking about, but Russia also is not really in conquest, and Mr. Austin knows this. And the question is not that Russians impressive weapons, which are impressive, many of them are outstanding, and some of them United States will not have for another 20 years, maybe. But the point is that actually Russia is not into the conquest, and essentially we all know that the war, the start of SMO was essentially imposed on Russia, and many people begin to speak about this openly, even those people who don't like Russians, like American Nazis. You can look it up at RT, for example, and he says, you know what, yeah, he's not Russophile by any means, but he even admits the fact that Russians had to react, they had to move in, so there you go. So there was no conquest really, but yeah, Russia now already got 4 large territories to itself, more than 100,000 square kilometers, and if it's, he calls it failure, well, okay, that's how he was taught, I guess, and wherever he graduated, West Point and Command and General Staff College in Kansas, Leavenworth, Kansas, so yeah, sure, let's call it this way, but the reality, of course, is such that, and my last video also was about it, is the fact that they completely lost the plot in the West. And while we have this situation with a little bit of the operational pause and Russian mobilized troops beginning to stream into the both rear for basically traditional military task of the new essentially military district, but also to the front lines to reinforce Russian defenses and some Russian advances in Donbass, we have to keep in mind that the life doesn't stop. Markets continue to operate, however badly, but reality is even more important in terms of economics and in terms of what is going on with the combined West today. And look at this. So suddenly there we have the situation with energy. And if you look attentively at the Spiegel politic, and it was yesterday, they suddenly admit that all those, liquefied natural gas terminals, which they were supposed to build, and they are building them for receiving of their American LNG, well, they turn out to be more than 2 times expensive. So they have been, instead of, I believe, from 3.3 billion euros, they went up to 6.4, something like that. You can look it up. And of course, the maintenance of them will be also twice as expensive. And wait when Germany and others will receive extremely expensive American liquefied natural gas. And hey, what can I say? They decided to do this completely on their own. And here what we have to start talking about. There is a lot of talk about that sanctions, basically did Russia, a lot of harm, and they have been a problem. In some sense, they did create problems, no doubt. In reality, of course, there was no real harm. And fact is, in the long run, those sanctions against Russia, they are, well, frankly, extremely beneficial to Russia. And this is the problem with, for example, modern Western analysts, so to speak, and economic, think tanks and all other, orgs which provide this, so to speak, strategic picture, which they don't, because they don't know shit from Shinola. But let me show you something which will tell you importance of keeping things in a dynamics. Of course, you can always do the Polaroid snapshot, of the situation. You will look at it and say, oh yeah, this is good or bad, depending on how this immediate picture, the instance which you fixated or fixed on your whatever Polaroid film or nowadays digitally. So, but we cannot do that. Anybody who is really seriously into trying to understand the surroundings and the current situation, which is unprecedented, we always need to keep things in a dynamics, in how they change from point A to point B to point C over time. And let me show you something which many people do not understand. For example, I'll give you yeah, I'll give you Exhibit A in terms of sanctions on Russia. By now, Russian car market has only three types of the car producers, manufacturers. They are Russian. The Russians have a pretty advanced and developed car industry. There are Chinese. Chinese gladly go into Russian market selling their cars. And of course, Korea refused to leave Russian market, so that Russians have their access to, well, actually excellent Korean cars, be that Kias, Daewoo's and Hyundai's, which are excellent cars, by the way, extremely competitive and wonderful cars. So the rest of them left. And let me show you something how it looked like. And that was the upper information which these people from all those Wall Street journals and what have you, they continue to operate because they look at this. You see these statistics. I deliberately put for you the May in English, and this is Russian statistics. And as you can see yourself, with the start of the special military operation, and Russian monthly production dropped precipitously because many car brands started to withdraw from Russian market. They stopped supplying with the spare parts, assembly plants for Renault, Peugeot, for other brands of the like Audi and Volkswagen. They started to just leave Russia. And while you can see yourself that the production of the trucks and other vehicles remained more or less steady, you saw yourself the humongous drop in the production in May. But if you begin to look further down the road, you look at June, then July, then August and September, you suddenly recognize that in terms of passenger cars, Russian auto industry begins to recover, and recover dramatically actually. And the question comes back to my last video, as you can see yourself, how come? Because obviously nowadays there are issues with the production of cars because of the lack of chips, microchips. Well, Russians who use chips on their cars, and the model line, for example, of modern Lada is pretty decent. It's a decent car, actually. Some German automobile magazines actually were uploading, for example, the latest Lada models. So, how come? Well, as I already stated last time when I was talking about the microchips, Russia produces her own microchips, Russia produces her own microelectronics, and Russia started to do the import substitution from the get-go. It took about several months to recover, but as you can see yourself, dynamics of it is kind of telling. Everything's coming back to the levels which are sustainable in terms of automobile market in Russia. You do not have to go out and buy, well, let's be frank, overpriced, over-engineered German Mercedes or Audi. They are expensive anyway. And for that, you can always go out and buy really nice Hyundai or real nice Daewoo or Kia or Lada, and they are as good as any car, on the road. Pretty good cars, believe me. And you can drive them. And in Russia, you don't have to have these overwhelming offerings constantly on all those dealerships. And what the level of the automobile market, which you have here, and you can see it in this graph, is sustainable. It is enough, or if you want to say it, good enough for Russia to have just still the same goddamn, traffic jams and problems in Vladivostok, Novosibirsk, and Moscow. It changes nothing because Russians continue to buy the cars as they need them. And here you see the situation in the dynamics. Obviously, if you look at the a little bit further in terms of how it all develops and how the sanctions really didn't affect Russia per se. In fact, they spurred Russian development. I will give you obviously the old it's 2021 energy spread, so to speak, as you can see yourself, and we will have more per results of the 2022, which will be somewhat different, obviously, because there are fluctuations, there are desperate attempts of the West to kill Russian exports to the Western Europe, for example, but they will remain pretty much the same structure of the production of the energy. And as you can see yourself, Russia produces about 70% of the energy production of the United States, and it's the third energy production and consumption country in the world. It produces more than India, which in India has 10 times population. But let's go to the more recent things. For example, another crucial metric which many people still do not understand. We go to the International Steel Association and look what we have. This is interesting. This is for September 2022. It's a steel production, which matters, as you cannot do things without steel. If you don't produce steel, you are goner. You don't have civilization. And as you can see yourself, per September, we have the Russia producing about 80%, well, more than that actually, 85% of the steel production of the United States. And it's obviously more than 2 times larger production than this fabled German economy. But if you look attentively at the change from September 2021 to September 22, you will see yourself that Russian basically contraction or shrinkage was about 7%. American basically decline was 7.5%. If you look at Germany, it's twice that of the United States, more than twice. And that tells you quite a bit what you need to know about European economy and in general, in particular, German economy. And as you can see yourself, the production, Russia produces more than 2 times the quantity of steel than Germany, and stays about the same level as the United States. Obviously, with China outproducing everybody by the factor of 10, but again, we knew this all along. So that tells you that, well, basically, this is just one of the metrics which you have to consider when looking at the economic situation and looking at those, basically chaos and convulsive attempts of the West to put a good face on the situation with Ukraine. And, talk is cheap, really. And while we're talking about the sanctions, which are also kind of related, well, all of it is related, actually, and interconnected. I probably would have been making a lot of money just, giving the economic advices, but I don't do that because I respect people to whom I say something, and I respect myself because I don't sell snake oil. But let's take a look at something which is even more important. And here we have to come to this. About sanctions, if we talk about it. Look at this. Mr. Mishustin, it's exactly 1 week ago, and Russian government made available for Russian aerospace, commercial aerospace, something like 44 additional billion rubles for the production of the jet engines. Okay, what is 44 billion rubles? Roughly speaking, it's $900 million, but you cannot do this direct transfer. Let's put it this way. $1 billion in Russia goes about 2, 3, 4 times further than any $1 billion in the United States. Probably even further than that. But look at this. Why Russia, basically, and Russian government availed additional 44 billion rubles for the expansion of the engine production? Here's what Mr. Mishustin says a week ago, and this is highlighted. He explained why. He specified that within next 2 years, you need the Russian United Aircraft Corporation, UAC, part of the Rostec, and Rostec is this giant. So, and he says that you need to provide the production of 50 engines of PD-8 What is PD-8? It's a smaller version of PD-14, and it goes to the Russified Sukhoi Superjet. It's 50 engines. That means there, well, at least 20, because we need some spares, and at least 20 Sukhoi Superjets. Then you have to have 20 engines for PS-90A, it's for the Tu-114, and additional 14 engines, PD-14, for the MS-21. And look what also is stated there, the second paragraph, and what has to be completed, all research and development on the creation of the what is called super high thrust PD-35. And as he says, you have to complete the development and creation of the prototype of this unique power plant by the end of 2024. Aha! So, it is actually for people who understand a little bit in the situation of the commercial airspace, they have to have their jaws on the floor because they understand. We're looking at the whole line of the extremely advanced Russian engines. But let's take a look why this PD-35 is so important, because obviously PD-14 is the serial produced engine right now. I don't know, I believe there's something like 10 engines already ready to be installed on the MS-21s. PD-8 evidently is already getting into the serial production, but PD-35 with its incredible thrust and advancements, well, let's take a look at it. Here's what Rostec reported last year, more than a year, about 13 months ago. This is what is called, Rostec has assembled the heart of the giant PD-35 aircraft engine, and it's the thrust range of the PD-35 and its smaller derivatives, and the compressor already have been created, is range from 24 to 38 tons. PD-35, the standard PD-35, which will be installed on the Russian-Chinese CR-929 and other Russian aircraft, is actually, when you look at what 38 tons of thrust is, it is 85,000 pounds. Do you know what 85,000 pounds of thrust is? I can tell you one thing. It is the thrust which is up there, either approaching or within the range of the most advanced and most powerful engines by Rolls-Royce and General Electric, with the exception of the one of the, I don't remember all models, I can look it up, of the largest General Electric engine, one of the GMs, I believe, which actually can run into 114,000 pounds. But if you look of all Trents, Rolls-Royce Trents engine, for example, PD-35 is up there and basically beating most of its model line, with the exception of one engine, which really reaches, yes, 94 to 110,000 pounds. So PD-35 is an extremely advanced and state-of-the-art engine, and that is why China actually is very interested in it. But there is another thing. If you look at 44 billion rubles, and we already stated, even incompetent and illiterate conversion of those 44 billion rubles into about $900 million, let me put it this way, guys. Even the Trent, the first Trent, Rolls-Royce Trent, which was researched and developed and first saw light in 1988, had the price tag for the development alone of around 400 sterling pounds in 1988, which when converted today for today's money is more than $1.25 billion. But this is just the part of it. The developing of the line of those engines, if you even go to the Wikipedia and look Rolls-Royce Trent engines, you will see yourself constant throw of the additional investment by the British government towards Rolls-Royce, which range from 250 billion pounds to 400 billion, million pounds, and when you put this together, you will run into several $billion for just development of the Trent line, model line. So Russians doing extremely well, evidently, with their engines, when you have not only 44 billion covering not just the production of the serial engines, but already completion of the prototype, which will be taken out, and it already has the compressor. and already has the what is called hard part, so to speak, which matters the most. So when you look at this and you look at those things and begin to kind of make your own conclusions on what is going on, it becomes absolutely clear that not only United States always considered Soviet Union the enemy, obviously, but now it considers Russia an existential enemy. And obviously, United States is not capable to compete with China, but very soon, and what is coming up, and that is why basically a lot of what's happening geopolitically, apart from the psychosis of the people in State Department and neocon cabal, which drives American foreign policy into a complete disaster, we have the situation that actually, yeah, Russia is becoming, and as you can see yourself, it in dynamics, a really high-tech hub for some things which really matter. For example, I already made a video, and with all my deep respect to Chinese culture, Chinese achievements, some of them absolutely magnificent, outstanding achievements, including the lifting from poverty of around 700 million people. This is outstanding historic achievement. But let me put it this way very simply. China will not get all indigenous top-notch competitive engine for a long time now. Now the Chinese themselves basically state that, well, yeah, 2030 maybe, you know, the proper middle range, middle thrust engine, something which is equivalent of PD-14. I don't think so, but let's say that 2030, by that time there will be a new development of the model line for the PD engines. And when you look at this, you begin to understand what Russia is doing geopolitically in terms of the economics too, which is becoming the engineering house. But hey, because as we already spoke, and Ursula von der Leyen, who are actually gynecologists and specialists in the bringing up children, she's whatever, you know, the doctor, she certainly knows much about the microchips and how Russians use and cannibalized Ukrainian washing machines for taking out chips to put them on their, you know, cars, aircraft, you know, things of this nature, and even spaceships. So, yeah, but she knows, right? She is the chairman of the European Commission. And this is what is happening right now. And as Siemens learned a few years ago, that Siemens, yes, with its incredible turbines, that it thought that it can dictate conditions to Russia. Well, as you know, that Siemens have been basically thrown out of Russian market of the large power turbines, gas turbines, and Russians already are into their development. Not only they're already producing above 100 megawatt turbines, but they go into the 200 plus area, and yeah, they already have the prototypes and they're working on the serial development. So yeah, you know what, as I do not hold much stock in his opinions on any geopolitical matters, such as the famous Russian movie director of Armenian descent, Karen Shakhnazarov, an excellent director actually. But when he says that sanctions are good for Russia, he actually correct. And sanctions are good for Russia because for the first time, Russians completely look, I mean, the majority of Russians, they look at the West with the contempt, and Russians just really believe in their engineering and industrial capabilities, which were always there. Not all of it was annihilated and destroyed by those Harvard boys who never could, you know, basically sweep the streets in any city, but let alone command the economy. And we can see for the last few years a steady overcoming of the consequences and the tragedy of the 1990s. And yes, Russia is becoming an industrial giant, and even the dynamic numbers tell you about this. So it's not only just the size of the economy, which is large, it is much larger than German economy, but it is basically it's the ability to withstand any kind of pressure and recover from any kind of the tactical setbacks. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. And as always, I want to really thank my wonderful patrons and people who support me, because it allows me to do what I'm doing. And as always, those people who can afford, please support me on the Patreon and other whatever the thingy is with the coffee. And subscribe to my channel. And guys, I'll be talking to you later. Have a nice week. Bye-bye.